They ask me if the stories are true, if there really was a woman who brought down Edric Hollow with 70 head of cattle and a Winchester rifle, if she really never missed a shot, not even from horseback at full gallop, if the legends about Steady-Eye Sarah are real or just whiskey talk that grew taller with every telling. I tell them this: I was there. My name is Ridge Halvers. 25 years ago I was foreman of Split Pine Ranch, working for a quiet widow named Aerys Veil. Good woman, kept to herself mostly, ran 200 head of prime Wyoming beef on 1,500 acres of the prettiest grassland you ever saw. I thought I knew her. Thought she was just another ranch wife trying to hold things together after her husband passed. Thought maybe I was there to help keep the wolves at bay. Men like Edric Hollow who saw a woman alone and figured she'd be easy pickings. I was wrong about all of it. See what I didn't know. What nobody in 3 counties knew, except maybe a handful of old show folks, was that the quiet widow pouring my morning coffee had once stood before 10,000 people and split playing cards with bullets. That she'd ridden with Buffalo Bill himself. That her name, her real name, had once been shouted from New York to San Francisco. Steady-Eye Sarah, the woman who never missed. I found out the hard way. We all did. Edric Hollow most of all. You want to know what really happened that summer of 1880, when a cattle drive turned into a war, when a widow became a legend all over again? Pull up a chair. I'll tell you true. But I warn you, the truth is stranger and more beautiful than any legend could be. I remember because the meadowlarks started singing in March, a full month ahead of normal. Their bright calls carried across the grasslands every morning when I walked from the bunkhouse to the main ranch. Sweet sound, the kind that makes you think the world might be a gentle place after all. I was wrong about that too. Split Pine Ranch sat in a natural basin sheltered by low hills on 3 sides. The Bighorn Mountains rose up to the west, their peaks still white with snow even as the valley turned green. A spring-fed creek cut through the property, cold and clear. Best water in the territory. That's what made the land valuable. That's what made it worth killing for. Though I didn't know that yet either. Mrs. Veil Aerys, though I didn't call her that then, usually had coffee ready by the time I reached the main house. She'd stand on the porch in a simple cotton dress, her dark hair pulled back practical, watching the sunrise paint the eastern sky gold and pink. She was 42 that spring, slender, weathered by Wyoming wind and sun. Fine lines framed her eyes, not from age so much as from squinting at distant horizons. Her hands were strong from ranch work. Her voice was quiet but carried authority when she gave instructions. Nothing about her suggested danger. Nothing hinted at what she'd been, what she could still be. "Morning, Ridge," she said that particular April day, same as always. "Morning, Mrs. Veil." I took the cup she offered. "Stock looks good. That new bull's settling in fine." "Gravehorn's gentle for his size," she agreed. "Ish has a way with difficult animals." We stood there a moment, steam rising from our coffee, watching the day wake up. Peaceful, ordinary, the kind of morning you don't think to remember because it feels like all the others. But I remember it now, because it was the last truly quiet day we had. "Ridge," she said, "I need you to ride out to the north fence line today. Check the posts near Blacktail Pass." I nodded, expecting trouble. Just being thorough. Her green eyes stayed on the horizon. "Winter was hard. Want to make sure everything's solid before summer." Made sense. That's what I thought anyway. Later I'd understand she wasn't worried about fence posts. She was mapping escape routes, planning for what was coming. But that morning I just drank my coffee and watched the meadowlarks. I was in the back storage room looking for spare leather strapping. The place was cluttered with 12 years of accumulated ranch supplies. Tools, tack, old saddles Bram Veil had meant to repair but never got around to. That's when I found the poster. It was wedged behind a broken saddle stand, rolled up tight and tied with faded ribbon. I almost didn't unroll it, almost put it back. But something made me curious. Maybe the ribbon too fancy for ranch storage, maybe just boredom. I spread it flat on the dusty workbench. The paper was yellowed, dated 1873. Bold letters across the top, Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show. Below that, illustrations of riders, Indians, sharpshooters. And in the center, Larger than the rest, a woman in frontier costume holding a rifle. Steady eye. Sarah, the text proclaimed. The woman who never misses. See her split a playing card edge on at 50 paces. Watch her extinguish candle flames with bullets. Marvel as she strikes moving targets from horseback at full gallop. I stared at the illustration. The woman's face was younger, smoother. Her hair was styled different, more theatrical. But the eyes were the same. That calm, measuring gaze I'd seen 1,000 times across the breakfast table. Green eyes that didn't blink when they looked at you. My hands went cold. I rolled the poster back up carefully, tied the ribbon exactly as I'd found it, put it back behind the saddle stand. I didn't mention it to anyone. Not Ish or Raoul, the other hands. Not Mrs. Veil herself, but I started watching her different after that. The way she walked. Balanced, centered like a dancer or a fighter. Every step deliberate. The way she held things. Coffee cup, pitchfork, Winchester rifle, all with the same easy competence. Nothing wasted, nothing uncertain. The way she looked at distances. Squinting sometimes at far ridges, her lips moving slightly like she was calculating numbers I couldn't see. And the Winchester, always close, leaning by the door, propped in the barn, lying on the porch rail. She said it was for rattlesnakes and coyotes. Every rancher kept a rifle handy, but most ranchers didn't keep theirs cleaned and oiled with the care you'd give a newborn. One evening I watched her from the barn door as she stood on the porch in the fading light. A hawk circled overhead, probably hunting field mice. She tracked it with her eyes, her body shifting subtly, unconsciously, like she was lining up a shot she'd never take. The hawk was 400 yards up if it was a foot, and she was following it like she could touch it. Bram had been dead 4 months when I found that poster. I'd worked for him 5 years before that. Good man Bram. Gentle, honest, maybe a little too trusting for frontier country. He treated his hands fair, paid on time, never asked more than he'd do himself. He died in January during the worst blizzard anyone could remember. Went out to check the north fence line, same section Mrs. Veil had sent me to that April morning. They said he got turned around in the whiteout. Said he stumbled into a ravine. The official word was hunting accident. A stray bullet from some fool shooting at shadows in the storm. But Bram didn't hunt. Never carried anything but a working rifle for predators. And he knew that land like his own hands. We found him 3 days after the storm cleared, shot clean through the back. The bullet had gone straight through his heart. Quick death, merciful folks said. Mrs. Veil didn't cry at the funeral. She stood straight and dry-eyed while the preacher talked about God's mysterious ways. She thanked the neighbors for coming. She shook hands with Sheriff Calder Ricks when he offered the official condolences. I stood back by the cemetery fence watching her, thinking she was in shock, thinking grief would hit her later in private. Now I wonder if what I saw wasn't shock at all, if it was cold, clear certainty, if she already knew what I'd only learn later, that Bram Veil wasn't killed by weather or accident or mystery. He was murdered, executed by a man who wanted his land and thought a widow would be easier to break than a husband. The warnings started in late April. Anal Rick rode in first, his gray beard dusty from hard travel. He owned Broken Wheel Ranch 20 miles west. Good neighbor, solid man. He'd helped Bram with roundup more times than I could count. But he looked worried when he dismounted that morning. Aerys, he said. He was one of the few who called her by her first name. Need to talk to you about this cattle drive you're planning. We were in the yard. Mrs. Veil had been working with Gravehorn, the big longhorn bull. She handed the lead rope to Ish and walked over, wiping her hands on her skirt. What about it? She asked. Wilson's outfit got hit last week. Thunder Canyon, right where the trail narrows. Lost 60 head and 2 men. Mrs. Veil's expression didn't change. Hollow's gang. Who else? Anal spat into the dirt. Edric Hollow's running 15 men now, maybe more. They're hitting every small drive headed for Cheyenne, taking stock or burning it. Either way, the small ranchers lose. And Sheriff Ricks. Anal laughed bitter. Sheriff says he's short on men. Can't patrol every trail. Funny thing though, he's wearing a new silver pocket watch. Looks a lot like one Hollow carries. Mrs. Veil nodded slowly. No surprise in her face, like she'd known this was coming. "How many armed men can you spare for the drive?" she asked. "Me and 3 hands," Anil said. "But Aerys, that's not enough. Hollow's got professional guns. Former cavalry, some of them. They know how to hit hard and disappear." "Then we'll need to be smarter than hard," she said simply. Anil studied her. "Bram ever tell you about Hollow's offer, the one that came a week before he died?" I hadn't heard this. I stepped closer, listening. "He told me," Mrs. Veil said quietly, "Hollow offered to buy Split Pine for 1/5 of its value. When Bram refused, Hollow said he'd regret it. And then Bram turned up dead in a blizzard." Anil's voice was flat. "You see the pattern?" "I see it." She looked past him toward the mountains. "That's why I'm not selling. That's why I'm driving these cattle to market myself. Split Pine reaches Cheyenne, gets fair price, and Edric Hollow learns that not every widow folds." Anil shook his head slowly. "You're braver than most, Aerys. Or maybe you've got more faith in that Winchester than is wise." Something flickered in her eyes then, almost like amusement. "Faith has nothing to do with it," she said. 2 days later the stranger arrived. Woman, actually. Mid-30s, traveling alone. Unusual enough to draw attention. She rode a decent horse and wore Eastern clothes that marked her as out of place. Not quite city fancy, but not frontier practical either. She asked for Mrs. Veil by name. I brought her to the house. Mrs. Veil came out onto the porch and I saw something I'd never seen before. Aerys Veil surprised. Not much. Just a slight widening of the eyes, a fractional hesitation. But for a woman who moved through the world like she had every step planned, 3 moves ahead, it was shocking. "Niella," Mrs. Veil said. "It's been a long time." 12 years, the woman Niella replied. Her voice was educated Eastern. "I wasn't sure I'd find you. You vanished pretty completely." "That was the idea." Mrs. Veil gestured toward the house. "Come inside. Ridge, that'll be all for now." I nodded and walked away. But I didn't go far, just around the corner of the house where I could hear through the open window. I'm not proud of eavesdropping, but something in Mrs. Veil's face had set warning bells ringing. This woman knew her from before Bram, before Split Pine, before she became the quiet widow, before she stopped being whoever she really was. "It's about Corrick," Niella was saying. "My brother. He wrote that he had work with a cattle outfit in Wyoming. Good pay, he said. Steady employment." A pause. Then Mrs. Veil's voice, careful. "What outfit?" "That's why I'm here. When I reached Cheyenne, I asked around. Found out he's riding for a man named Edric Hollow." Silence. Long enough that I risked a glance through the window. Mrs. Veil stood very still, her back to me. When she spoke, her voice was different, harder. "Corrick Dane is working for Hollow." Not a question, a statement like she was testing how it sounded. "You know him," Niella said. "I thought you might. From St. Louis back when you were with the show. He talked about you sometimes. Said you taught him more than anyone else ever had." "I taught him to shoot," Mrs. Veil said quietly. "I taught him focus, discipline, patience. I didn't teach him to use those skills to terrorize honest ranchers. He's not a bad man, Aerys. He's hunting for the man who murdered my husband." The words came out flat final. "That makes him my enemy, Niella, no matter what he was before." I heard chair legs scrape. Niella's voice rose slightly, pleading now. "That's why I came. To warn you. Corrick's been asking questions about local ranches. About you specifically. When he realized Aerys Veil was Aerys Mitchell, when he understood who you'd become, his whole manner changed." "Changed how?" He got quiet. Wouldn't talk about the assignment, just said he needed to think. "Aerys, I don't know what Hollow's planning, but Corrick's involved, and he knows who you are, what you can do." Another long silence. "Thank you for the warning," Mrs. Veil finally said. "You can stay the night. Roads aren't safe after dark." "What are you going to do?" "What I have to. I'm driving my cattle to Cheyenne. If Corrick and Hollow's gang try to stop me, they'll learn some lessons are never forgotten." That evening I found Mrs. Veil in the barn. She was alone with Ashfall Bram's black stallion. The horse was magnificent, powerful, temperamental, barely rideable for most men. Bram had gentled him through patience and time. After Bram died, nobody could get near Ashfall for weeks, except Mrs. Veil. She stood with the stallion now, one hand on his neck, speaking too softly for me to hear. The barn was dim, lit only by a single lantern. Shadows moved across the walls. I cleared my throat. She turned calm as always. "Ridge, something you need." "Ma'am, I couldn't help but overhear some of what that woman said." "No point lying about it." "About Hollow planning something. About this man Corrick." She nodded slowly. "You're wondering if we should postpone the drive." "I'm wondering if we should call it off entirely," I said. "Sell local, take the loss, wait for better times." "There won't be better times." She turned back to Ashfall, stroking his muzzle. "Hollow's buying up every small outfit he can. The ones who won't sell, he drives out. By next year he'll own half the basin. The year after, all of it." "Maybe that's just how it goes," I said. "Big fish eat small fish." "No." Her voice had steel in it now. "That's how it goes when good people give up. When they decide fighting isn't worth the cost." She looked at me then. Really looked with those green eyes that seemed to see right through to your backbone. "Bram built this ranch from nothing. 16 years of work. He treated the land right, treated his people right, believed in doing things honest. Then Edric Hollow decided he wanted Split Pines water rights, and when Bram wouldn't sell Hollow, had him killed." I stared. "You know that for certain?" "I know it the way you know winter's coming when you see geese flying south. I can't prove it yet, but I will." "How?" She smiled. Thin, cold smile I'd never seen before. "By refusing to disappear. By driving these cattle to market and getting fair price and showing Hollow that murdering one Veil doesn't mean he gets to steal what Bram built." She paused. "And if Hollow sends his men to stop me, they're going to learn I'm not the helpless widow they're expecting." Something in her tone made my skin prickle. "Ma'am," I said carefully, "that woman Niella mentioned you being with some show in St. Louis." "Buffalo Bill's Wild West," she said. No hesitation, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. 7 years, 1866 to 1873. "Doing what?" "Shooting." She said it simple, like saying cooking or sewing. Trick shooting, they called it, though there wasn't much trick to it, just practice and math and not flinching. I thought about the poster, about the woman splitting cards and hitting candles. "You were good at it," I said. "I was the best." No pride in her voice, just fact. "That's why Buffalo Bill paid me more than anyone except his lead riders. That's why newspapers from Boston to San Francisco wrote about Steady Eye Sarah." Steady Eye Sarah. Hearing her say the name out loud made it real in a way the poster hadn't. "Why'd you quit?" I asked. "Because I met Bram at a Chicago exhibition. Because he looked at me like I was a person, not a spectacle. Because he asked if I wanted to build something quiet and lasting instead of living for applause." She turned back to Ashfall. "I chose the quiet life. Chose to be Mrs. Bram Veil instead of Steady Eye Sarah. Thought I could leave that part of myself behind. But you can't." "No," she agreed. "Turns out you can't bury who you are just by changing your name. And right now Edric Hollow needs to meet both women, the widow and the shooter, because one of them won't give up what's hers, and the other one never misses." The next morning Mrs. Veil called us all together in the yard. Me, Ish, Raoul, young Ven, who'd just hired on that spring. We stood in a loose circle while she laid out the plan. "We're driving the herd to Cheyenne," she said. 200 head. We leave in 1 week." Ven started to object. She raised a hand. "I know the risks. Hollow's gang is hitting drives. I know that. But we're not doing this the way others have. We're going to be smarter." She unrolled a map on the porch rail. Old hand-drawn showing terrain most ranchers avoided. "Thunder Canyon is where they've hit the last 3 drives," she said. "That's the main route. Wide trail, good water, easy travel. Also the perfect ambush point." "So we avoid it," I said. "Partly. Ridge, you'll take 100 head and most of the hands along the eastern route. Make noise, raise dust, look like the main drive. Draw attention." "And you?" Ish asked. "I'll take the other 100 through the northern hills, Blacktail Pass and the old routes nobody uses anymore. Harder ground, but I know it. We'll bypass Thunder Canyon entirely and meet up with Ridge's group north of Carter's Crossing." It was a good plan, smart tactics, the kind of thing a military mind would devise, not a rancher. "What about Hollow's scouts?" Ral asked. "They'll spot us splitting the herd." "Let them," Mrs. Veil said. "Let them report back that we're dividing our strength. Let them think we're making it easier for them." She folded the map. Her jaw was set, her eyes hard. "Hollow's been picking off small outfits because he thinks we're weak and scattered. Time to show him different. Time to prove that backbone matters more than numbers." None of us spoke for a moment. Then Ish nodded. "I'm in," he said. "Bram was good to me, good to my family. I won't let his dream die without a fight." Ral and Ven agreed. All eyes turned to me. I thought about the poster in the storage room, about Steady Eye Sarah, about the cold certainty in Mrs. Veil's voice when she said, "I never miss." I thought about Bram, who'd trusted me, who'd made me foreman because he said I had good judgment. And I thought about the guilt I carried, the secret I hadn't told anyone, that I was supposed to ride with Bram that January day, that I'd been too drunk from the night before, that he'd gone alone to check those fence lines because I couldn't drag myself out of bed, that if I'd been there maybe he'd still be alive. "I'm in," I said. Mrs. Veil smiled. First genuine smile I'd seen since Bram died. "Then we start preparing tomorrow. I want every rifle cleaned, every horse checked, every rope inspected. We're not just driving cattle. We're making a statement." She looked at each of us in turn. "Edric Hollow thinks he can take what he wants from people who won't fight back. We're going to teach him a lesson the hard way, that some people don't break, they just reload." Sitting here now, 25 years later, I can still see that moment. Mrs. Veil standing on the porch in her simple dress, morning light catching her hair, looking like any frontier widow trying to survive another season. Nothing threatening about her, nothing to suggest danger, except the Winchester leaning against the porch rail, and those green eyes that never blinked. I didn't know then what was coming, didn't know about the crossing, the ambush, the confrontation with Corrick Dane, didn't know how close we'd come to dying in those Wyoming hills, didn't know that before it ended I'd see Aerys Veil become Steady Eye Sarah one more time, and didn't know that the quiet widow would turn out to be the most dangerous person in 3 territories. But I knew one thing sitting there in the April sunlight watching her outline the plan. Whatever happened next, it was going to be a hell of a story. You want to know when everything really changed? When I stopped seeing Aerys Veil as a woman who needed protecting and started understanding what she truly was. It wasn't the day I found that poster, wasn't even the day she told us about Buffalo Bill and Steady Eye Sarah. It was 3 weeks before the drive, late at night when I discovered what she'd been doing in secret since Bram died, what she'd found in that bullet. I couldn't sleep that night. Happens sometimes when your conscience won't let you rest. I'd been dreaming about Bram again. Same dream I'd had 100 times since January. Him standing in the snow calling my name, me too far away to reach him. The crack of a rifle shot. Him falling. Me waking up with my heart pounding and the guilt sitting on my chest like a stone. It was past midnight. I pulled on my boots and coat figuring I'd walk it off. Sometimes the night air and the big sky helped, made me feel small enough that my failures didn't seem so large. The main house was dark except for one window, the barn. I saw the lantern light spilling through the cracks in the barn door, and my first thought was fire. My second thought was thieves. But then I heard the sound, metal on metal, precise, rhythmic, someone working with tools. I crossed the yard, quiet, pushed the barn door open, slow. Mrs. Veil sat at Bram's old workbench bent over something small. Her hair was down loose around her shoulders. I'd never seen it that way before. She wore a simple nightdress with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cold. Spread on the bench in front of her were things that made my blood run cold. A bullet, split open, dissected like a doctor might cut apart a body to see what killed it. calipers for measuring, a magnifying glass, papers covered in notes and numbers, and beside them a book I recognized. Bram's journal. She must have heard me because she looked up. No surprise in her face, like she'd been expecting me. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. I stepped closer, looking at the workbench. "What is this?" "The truth." She picked up the bullet fragments carefully. "This is what killed Bram." My throat went tight. "The bullet that I pulled out of his body myself." "Yes." Her voice was steady, clinical. "The doctor wanted to leave it in, said there was no point, but I insisted." She held it under the lantern light. Even split apart, I could see it had been a clean piece of work. Well-made ammunition. "Winchester .44-40 caliber," she said. "Fired from at least 200 yards, judging by the deformation pattern. Maybe farther." "How can you tell?" "Because I've fired thousands of rounds in my life, Ridge. I know how bullets behave at different distances, how they tumble, how they fragment, how they carry." She set it down gently. "This shot was taken in a blizzard, near zero visibility, high wind, freezing temperatures that affect powder burn and trajectory." I stared at her. "You're saying—" "I'm saying this wasn't a hunting accident. This wasn't some fool shooting at shadows. This was a professional hit, executed by someone with military training and a scope-mounted rifle." The barn seemed to tilt around me. "You're sure?" "I'm certain." She opened Bram's journal, pointed to an entry dated 2 weeks before his death. "Read this." The handwriting was Bram's, neat, careful, like everything he did. "H came again today. Offer still the same 1/5 value for split pine. When I refused, he said I was being unreasonable, that men who can't see the future get left behind. There was something in his eyes when he said it, something cold. I told Aerys tonight that if anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. She told me I was being dramatic, but I don't think I am." My hands shook, holding the journal. "H. Hollow. Edric Hollow." She turned pages. "There are 6 more entries documenting his visits, his threats, his promises that things would be easier if Bram just sold out and moved on." "Why didn't you show this to Sheriff Ricks?" She laughed. Bitter, hard sound I'd never heard from her before. "Because Calder Ricks is on Hollow's payroll, has been for 2 years. You think a man living on a sheriff's salary can afford that silver watch, that new saddle, the renovations to his house?" I sat down heavy on a feed barrel. Everything I thought I knew about Bram's death was crumbling. "There's more," she said quietly. She pulled out a folded paper. "I found this tucked in the back of Bram's journal. Instructions, written the day before he died." I took it. The handwriting was shakier, like Bram had written it in a hurry, or in fear. "My dearest Aerys, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know I love you more than life. You made me happier than I deserved. But I also need you to know if I die unexpectedly, it's not God's will or bad luck. Edric Hollow made it clear last week that I had one more chance to sell, that men who didn't cooperate had unfortunate accidents. I'm not selling, which means I need you to be ready. There's a sealed envelope in my desk. Names, dates, every threat Hollow made. If I'm found dead, give it to Federal Marshal Daniel Wright in Cheyenne. Not Ricks, not local law. Federal. Promise me. And Aerys, don't let them take Split Pine. Don't let them win. You're stronger than you think you are. Stronger than I ever told you. I'm sorry I asked you to bury who you were. If I'm gone, maybe you can be her again. Maybe you need to be. All my love, Bram." I read it twice, then a third time. When I finally looked up, Mrs. Veil was watching me with eyes that held more pain than I'd ever seen in another human being. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew they were going to kill him. He knew, and he went out anyway, alone, in a blizzard." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Because that's who Bram was. He believed in doing what was right even when it was dangerous, even when it might cost him everything. Why didn't he run? Why didn't you both just leave?" "Because running would mean Hollow won, would mean giving up everything Bram built, everything we built together." She stood, walked to the barn door, looked out at the dark ranch. And because Bram believed the law would protect us eventually, that justice existed if you just waited long enough. "And you?" I asked. "What do you believe?" She turned back. In the lantern light she looked different, harder, like the widow had peeled away to reveal something forged in fire underneath. "I believe justice sometimes needs help arriving. I believe some men only understand one language. And I believe," she paused, her jaw tight, "I believe Bram deserves better than having his murder called an accident while his killer walks free and tries to steal his legacy." Silence filled the barn, just the sound of wind outside and horses shifting in their stalls. "That's why you're driving the cattle yourself," I said, understanding finally clicking into place. "Not because you need the money, because you need to prove Hollow can't break you." "Partly. Also because—" She picked up another paper from the workbench. A receipt. "I hired a private investigator in Denver. Former Pinkerton man. He tracked the ammunition. Winchester .44-40 with custom loading. Only 3 sources in the territory carry it. One of them supplies Hollow's ranch exclusively. That's evidence. It's a thread, not proof, but enough to start building a case." She gathered the papers, the bullet fragments, all of it. "I'm meeting with Marshal Wright when we reach Cheyenne, giving him everything. Bram's journal, the bullet, the ammunition records, witness statements I've been collecting. Hollow will know you're coming for him. Hollow already knows." She smiled that cold smile again. "Why do you think he's so eager to stop this drive? It's not about the cattle. It's about silencing me before I reach federal law with evidence." The weight of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just a cattle drive. It was a widow walking into enemy territory, daring them to try stopping her, using herself as bait to draw out the men who murdered her husband. It was either the bravest thing I'd ever heard or the most suicidal. "Mrs. Veil," I started. "Aerys," she said. "If we're going into this together, you should call me Aerys." "Aerys." I tried it out. Felt strange on my tongue. "This is dangerous, more dangerous than you're letting on." "I know. You could die." "I could." She looked at me directly. "Is that going to stop you from riding with me?" And there it was. The question I'd been avoiding since this whole thing started, because the truth was sitting in my gut like poison. Had been since January. "I should have been there," I said. The words came out rough, dragged from somewhere deep. "The day Bram died. I was supposed to ride with him." Aerys went very still. "What?" "I was supposed to check the north fence with him that morning. That was the plan. But I—" Shame burned my throat. I'd been drinking the night before. Not a lot. Just enough. I was sick that morning. Told Bram I couldn't ride. He said he'd go alone. I couldn't look at her. Couldn't bear to see the accusation in her eyes. "If I'd been there," I continued, "maybe I'd have seen the shooter. Maybe I could have warned him. Maybe—" "Ridge." Her voice cut through my spiral. "Look at me." I forced myself to meet her gaze. "You think you could have saved him?" she said. "I think I might have." "You're wrong." She picked up Bram's journal, flipped to another page I hadn't seen. "Read the last entry, the one he wrote the night before he died." I took it with shaking hands. "Tomorrow I check the north fence. Ridge offered to come, but I told him I'd go alone." He looked relieved. "Good. I need him here to look after Aerys if something happens. The north fence is where they'll make their move if they're going to. I know it. I can feel it. But if Ridge is there, they'll kill him too. 1 dead man is a hunting accident. 2 is murder harder to explain. I won't let Ridge die for my stubbornness. Tomorrow I go alone. God willing, I'm wrong about all of this, but if I'm right, at least Ridge will survive to help Aerys after." The words blurred. I read them again, not believing. "He protected you," Aerys said softly. "He knew it was a trap, and he walked into it anyway. Alone, because he didn't want you dying with him." "I didn't know," I whispered. "Neither did I. Not until I read that entry 3 weeks ago." She took the journal back gently. You've been carrying guilt for something that wasn't your fault. Bram chose to go alone to save your life. If you'd been there, you'd both be dead, and I'd have lost 2 good men instead of 1. The relief hit me like a physical blow. I put my head in my hands, fighting tears I hadn't let myself cry since the funeral. He saved me, I said. He did. And now you can honor that by helping me finish what he started. She put a hand on my shoulder, strong grip steady, by making sure his death meant something, by proving Hollow can't just murder his way to power. I looked up at her. This woman I'd thought I knew, this widow who turned out to be a legendary sharpshooter, this quiet rancher who was actually a warrior preparing for battle. I'm with you, I said. Whatever it takes. I owe Bram that much. You don't owe him anything. He'd say so himself. She smiled, sad and true. But I'm glad you're with me anyway. We're going to need every advantage we can get. She told me something else that night. Something I didn't understand the significance of until much later. The man who shot Bram, she said as we were putting away the evidence. He's good. Professional level. I know because I've studied the bullet pattern, the conditions, the distance. This wasn't luck. This was training. Military to cavalry scout, maybe sniper. She closed Bram's journal carefully. The kind of skills I used to teach. That's when she told me about Corrick Dane. Not everything, I wouldn't learn all of it until later. But enough. About how she'd met him in St. Louis in 1873 during the Wild West show. How he'd been a young cavalry scout assigned as liaison to the show. How he'd watched her practice one day and asked if she'd teach him. He had natural talent, she said, her voice distant with memory. Raw ability that just needed refinement. I showed him stance, breathing, how to read wind and distance. He absorbed everything like a sponge. And now he works for Hollow. Now he works for the man who killed my husband. Using skills I helped sharpen. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. That's the real irony, Ridge. I taught Corrick to shoot because he said he wanted to do good, to protect people. And now he's using those same lessons to threaten and intimidate on behalf of a murderer. Maybe he doesn't know what Hollow did, I offered. Maybe. Or maybe he doesn't care. She locked the workbench drawer that held all the evidence. Either way, if Corrick comes for us, I'll have to face him. Teacher and student, the thought makes me sick. Can you do it if it comes to that? She didn't answer right away. Just stood there in the lamplight looking smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. I don't know, she finally said. I hope I don't have to find out. Sitting here now, I see that night as the turning point. Not just because I learned the truth about Bram's death, not just because Aerys absolved me of guilt I'd been drowning in, but because it was the moment we became real partners. The moment the widow and the foreman became 2 people united in purpose, fighting not just for a cattle drive but for justice, for truth, for the idea that good men like Bram shouldn't die unavenged, and because it was the last quiet moment we'd have for a long time. The trouble came 2 days later. I was in the north pasture with Ish counting calves when we heard the shots. Not close, but not far either. Coming from Broken Wheel Ranch, Anal Rick's place 20 miles west. We rode hard. By the time we got there, it was over. 3 of Anel's barns were burning. His main house showed bullet holes in the walls. Anal himself sat on the porch steps, bloody rag pressed to his shoulder. Hollow's men, he said when we reached him. 8 of them. Came just after dawn. Aerys arrived minutes later riding Ashfall hard. She dismounted smooth, went straight to Anal. How bad? She asked, checking his wound. Through and through. I'll live. He winced as she probed the injury. They wanted to send you a message, Aerys. Made that clear. What message? That if you try to drive your cattle, you'll end up like me. Or worse. He gestured to the burning barns. They took 60 head, burned the rest of my winter hay, said this is what happens to people who don't cooperate with progress. I scanned the property, saw the destruction, the casual cruelty of it. This wasn't about theft. This was about terror, about making examples. Did you see who led them? Aerys asked. Anal nodded slowly. One man hung back from the others, didn't participate in the burning, just watched. Young fellow, maybe mid-30s. Called him Dane. Aerys went very still. Corrick Dane. That's the name. Anal studied her face. You know him? I did. Once. She looked toward the smoke rising from the barns. Where'd they go? North, toward the old Wilson mining claim. They've got a camp there, I think, using it as a base. Aerys's jaw tightened. I saw her calculating, planning. Then she made a decision. Ridge, get Anal to the doctor. Ish, ride back to Split Pine, tell everyone we moved the drive up. Tomorrow morning, not next week. Tomorrow, I protested. We're not ready. We're ready enough. Hollow just showed his hand. He's not waiting for us to come to him. He's making the first move. She swung back onto Ashfall. Which means we need to move before he set his full trap. Where are you going? Anal called after her. She reined Ashfall around. In the morning light, with smoke rising behind her, and that cold certainty in her eyes, she looked like something out of legend. Not a widow, not a rancher, a warrior. To let Corrick Dane know I'm coming, she said, and to remind him of some lessons he seems to have forgotten. She rode north before any of us could argue, and I sat there on my horse watching her go, knowing with absolute certainty that the quiet days were over. The war had begun. I'll tell you the truth about bravery. It's not charging into danger without fear. That's just stupidity. Real bravery is being scared out of your mind and doing what needs doing anyway. That's what I saw in Aerys Veil the day she rode alone to face the man she'd once taught, the man who now hunted her. And watching her ride toward the Wilson mining claim that morning, I understood something fundamental. I wasn't following a widow trying to save her ranch. I was following a woman who'd been hiding her true self for 12 years. And now, pushed past breaking, she was done hiding. God help anyone who stood in her way. I didn't let her go alone. Couldn't. Even knowing she was more capable than me with a rifle, more tactically minded, more dangerous than I'd ever be. Something in my gut said, if I let her ride off without backup, I'd regret it the rest of my life. I caught up to her a mile north of Anal's place. She heard me coming, of course she did, and reined Ashfall around. The black stallion danced sideways, eager for speed. I told you to get Anal to the doctor, she said. Ish can handle that. I pulled my horse alongside. You're not doing this alone. Ridge, no arguments. You can court-martial me later. I checked my rifle, made sure the action was smooth. Besides, you might need a witness, someone to tell the story true if things go bad. She looked at me for a long moment. Then something in her face softened. Not much, just enough. Stay behind me, she said. If shooting starts, you get to cover and stay there. Understood? Yes, ma'am. And Ridge, she turned Ashfall back north. What you're about to see, what I'm about to do, it's going to change how you think of me. Just remember, I'm still the same person. I just stopped pretending to be less. Then she spurred Ashfall forward, and I followed her toward whatever reckoning waited at the old Wilson claim. The mining camp sat in a hollow between two ridges. We left the horses a quarter-mile back and approached on foot. Aerys moved through the scrub brush like smoke. No wasted motion, no sound. I did my best to follow, feeling clumsy and loud by comparison. She held up a hand. We dropped low behind a stand of rocks. Below us, the camp spread out. 8 men, like Anel said, maybe 9. Horses picketed at the south end, supply wagon, tents arranged in neat rows, military precision. At the center, a large tent that probably served as headquarters. And standing outside that tent, studying a map spread on a makeshift table, was a man I assumed was Corrick Dane. Mid-30s, like Anel described. Lean-build, cavalry posture even when relaxed. He wore trail clothes, but they fit him different than working cowboy gear. More tailored, cared for. The gun belt at his hips held a custom Remington with a carved grip. "That's him," Aerys whispered. I looked at her. She was staring down at Corrick with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pain, yes, but also something else. Memory, maybe, or regret. "You taught him to shoot," I said quietly. I taught him more than that. Her voice was distant. I taught him to see, to read wind and light and distance, to understand that shooting isn't about the gun, it's about the space between you and the target, the breath you take, the moment you choose. She was quiet for a beat. And I taught him that skill without purpose is just violence, that the difference between a sharpshooter and a killer is knowing when not to pull the trigger. Looks like he forgot that lesson. No. She shook her head slowly. He remembers. That's what makes it worse. He's choosing this, choosing to use what I taught him for the wrong reasons. Below, one of Hollow's men called to Korik, pointed toward the north ridge. Korik straightened, shaded his eyes, looking directly at where we were hidden. He knows we're here, I breathed. He's known since we crested that ridge. Aerys stood slowly, deliberately, making herself visible. Korik always had the best eyes in the show, could spot a rabbit at 500 yards. Aerys, what are you? Staying hidden sends the wrong message. I'm not afraid of him. She stepped out from the rock, stood in plain view on the ridge. And he needs to know that. I watched helpless as she cupped her hands to her mouth. Korik Dane. Her voice carried clear across the hollow. I want to talk. The camp below went still. Men reached for rifles. Horses stamped nervously. But Korik just stood there staring up at her. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised his right hand. Palm out, the universal sign for Parley. He said something to his men. They relaxed slightly but stayed alert. Then Korik started walking up the slope toward us. They met halfway. I stayed back like Aerys ordered, rifle ready, scanning the camp below for any sign of treachery. But Hollow's men just watched, waiting. Korik stopped 10 feet from Aerys, close enough to talk, far enough to draw if needed. For a long moment neither spoke, just studied each other. Teacher and student, past and present, everything that had been and everything that could have been. Aerys Mitchell, Korik finally said. His voice was deeper than I expected, educated but with frontier roughness. Or should I say, Aerys Veil now? Mrs. Veil will do, she replied evenly. I heard you'd settled down, married a rancher, gave up the show. He glanced past her, saw me. Traded steady-eye Sarah for a quiet life. I traded applause for meaning. There's a difference. Is there? Something bitter in his tone. Seems to me you just traded one performance for another. Playing the frontier wife instead of the sharpshooter. Still pretending to be something you're not. I'm not pretending anymore. Her voice stayed calm, but I heard steel underneath. Which is why I'm here. To tell you face to face I'm driving my cattle to Cheyenne. If you or Hollow's men try to stop me, you're going to remember exactly what I'm capable of. Korik smiled. Sad smile, no humor in it. You think I forgot? He gestured to the Remington at his hip. I still have the gun you helped me pick out. St. Louis, 1873. Remember, you said the grip needed to fit my hand like it belonged there. I remember. Something flickered in her eyes. I remember a young man who wanted to make a difference, who talked about using his skills to protect people, to build something good. People change. No, people choose. She stepped closer. You chose to work for Edric Hollow, a man who murders honest ranchers, who terrorizes families, who burned Anal Rick's barns this morning just to send a message. I didn't burn anything. You watched it happen. That's the same as pulling the trigger. Her voice hardened. My husband is dead, Korik, shot in the back by one of Hollow's men, and now you're helping that same man try to steal everything Bram built. Korik flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. I didn't know about your husband, he said quietly. I'm sorry, Aerys. Sorry doesn't bring him back. She held his gaze. And it doesn't change what's coming. I'm taking those cattle to market. I'm meeting with Federal Marshal Wright. I'm bringing evidence of Hollow's crimes. And when Hollow ends up in prison or on a gallows, everyone who rode with him will answer for it too. That's a threat. That's a fact." She paused. "But it's also a choice. For you. Walk away now, Korik. Tonight. Ride out and don't look back. You can still choose to be the man you wanted to be when you were 24. For just a moment I thought he might actually do it. Might turn around and leave. The conflict was plain on his face. Then he shook his head. "Hollow pays well, pays regular, and in this territory that's hard to find. So it's about money. It's about survival." His jaw tightened. "Not all of us got to marry rich and retire from the show Aerys. Some of us had to keep working, keep scraping, take whatever jobs came along. Even if those jobs mean hurting innocent people. Even then." He stepped back, hand drifting toward his gun. Not threatening, just ready. "I'll tell you what I told Hollow. I'll do this job because that's what I'm paid for. But I won't enjoy it. And I'll give you one courtesy, one warning." "What's that?" "Turn around. Go home. Sell to Hollow for whatever he'll pay. Because if you drive those cattle, he's not going to just steal them. He's going to make an example. And I won't be able to protect you." "I don't need your protection," Aerys said quietly. "I never did. You just didn't understand that back then." Something passed between them. Some old wound reopening. "No," Korik agreed. "I guess I didn't." He turned to go, then stopped. "One more thing," he said without looking back. "When this is over, when we face each other for real, I won't miss out of respect. I can't afford to. So don't expect me to." "I won't," Aerys replied. "But Korik, neither will I." We were halfway back to the horses when she told me. "He was in love with me," she said abruptly. "Back in St. Louis, when I was teaching him." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. He never spoke it out loud. But I knew. She stared ahead, not looking at me. The way he'd find excuses to extend our practice sessions. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. He was young. I was something he'd never seen before. A woman who could outshoot any man alive. And you, I cared for him. As a student, as a friend. She climbed onto Ashfall. But I'd already met Bram. Already knew I was leaving the show to marry him. So when Korik finally worked up the courage to say something, she stopped. "What happened?" I asked gently. It was the last day before I left for Chicago. Korik asked me to dinner. Said he had something important to tell me. Her hands tightened on the reins. I told him before he could say it. Told him I was engaged. Getting married. Leaving the show and leaving this life behind. How'd he take it? He smiled, congratulated me, shook Bram's hand when they met later. She turned Ashfall south. But I saw something die in his eyes that day. Some hope he'd been carrying, and I think part of him never forgave me for it. That's not your fault. No, but it explains things. She urged Ashfall into a trot. When he looks at me now, he doesn't just see someone who taught him. He sees the woman who chose someone else. The life he wanted but never got. And now Bram's dead and I'm fighting to protect what Bram built, and Korik's on the other side trying to tear it down. You think he's doing this to hurt you? I think he's doing this because Hollow pays well, like he said. But I also think there's a part of him that wants to prove something, that he's good enough, strong enough, that choosing him wouldn't have been a mistake. She looked at me then, tears in her eyes but not falling. The worst part, Ridge, he would have been a good man, if he'd made different choices, if he'd let go of what he couldn't have and built something with what he could. But instead he's here, working for a murderer, using skills I taught him to threaten and intimidate. That's not on you. No, she agreed. But it still hurts. We reached Split Pine by noon. The place was organized chaos. Ish and Rahl had the cattle gathered. Ven was loading supply wagons. Anal arm in a sling but insisting he could ride had brought his 3 best hands like he'd promised. Aerys slid off Ashfall and immediately started issuing orders. Calm, clear, precise. The widow was gone. In her place stood the tactician. Ridge, you take the eastern group like we planned. 100 head, most of the hand's obvious trail. I want dust visible for miles. And you? 70 head through the northern route. Just me, Ish, and Ral. She looked at the remaining cattle. Gravehorn will lead them. He's steady enough. That's suicide, Anal protested. 3 people managing 70 head through Blacktail Pass. It's necessity. Aerys checked her Winchester, the specialized one I'd glimpsed in her trunk. Hollow's expecting a main force. He'll set his ambush accordingly. A smaller group moving through terrain he's not watching, that's our advantage. And if he figures it out... She looked at him with those calm green eyes. Then he'll learn what happens when you corner someone who has nothing left to lose except the one thing they'll die to protect. We moved out at dawn the next day. I led the eastern group like Aerys ordered. 100 head of prime beef, 6 armed men supply wagon. We made noise, raised dust, looked like exactly what we were, a cattle drive heading for Cheyenne. And somewhere to the north, invisible in the broken country, Aerys Veil took 70 head through terrain most folks wouldn't risk on a dare. We'd ridden maybe 10 miles when Ven rode up beside me. Ridge, riders on the ridge, north side. I looked, saw them. 3 men, maybe 4, watching from a distance. Not hiding, wanting to be seen. Hollow's scouts, I said. What do we do? Nothing. Let them watch. I kept the herd moving steady. That's the plan. They see us, they report back. Hollow thinks this is the whole drive. And Mrs. Veil? I thought about her riding Ashfall through the high country, about the Winchester across her saddle, about the cold certainty in her voice when she'd said, "I never miss." Mrs. Veil, I said, is about to remind some folks why they used to call her Steady Eye Sarah. The attack came that afternoon. We were approaching a narrow stretch between 2 ridges, good grazing on both sides, water nearby. Perfect place to rest the herd, also perfect ambush ground. I saw it the moment before it happened, the unnatural stillness, the way the birds had gone quiet. "Rifles up!" I shouted. The first shots cracked from the eastern ridge. 3 of Hollow's men positioned high, firing down into the herd. Cattle panicked, scattered. Our horses reared, but we were ready. Had been ready since leaving Split Pine. Anal and his boys returned fire, giving the rest of us time to get the herd moving, not toward the ambush, but south, back the way we'd come. "Fall back," I ordered. "Protect the stock." More shots. A bullet kicked dirt near my horse. Another shattered a wagon wheel. And then, from the western ridge, something impossible. A rifle shot. Singular. Precise. One of Hollow's men pitched backward, his rifle flying from his hands. Another shot. Second ambusher dropped. The third shooter, the smart one, went to ground. "Who the hell is that?" Ven shouted. I looked toward the western ridge. Saw a figure there. Black horse. Rifle raised. Aerys. She'd somehow circled around, gotten above Hollow's ambush. And now she was picking off his shooters with the same calm precision she might use to extinguish candles. Another shot. The third ambusher's rifle splintered in his hands. Then she was riding down the ridge, Ashfall, moving like liquid shadow, Winchester firing from Horseback. I'd seen trick shooting before, seen performers at county fairs. But this was different. This was art. This was mathematics made flesh. This was a woman who understood wind and distance and timing so perfectly that she made impossible shots look easy. The remaining ambushers broke. Ran, smart decision. Aerys rode up to us calm as if she'd just returned from checking fence posts. "Everyone all right?" she asked. We stared at her. Anel's mouth hung open. "That was..." Ven couldn't find words. "Adequate," Aerys said simply. She ejected spent shells from the Winchester, reloaded smooth and automatic. "Ridge, get the herd settled. We've got maybe an hour before Hollow realizes his scouts are missing and sends more." "Where's your group?" I managed to ask. "The 70 head. Safe. 2 ridges north, hidden in a box canyon I found last spring. Ish and Ral are with them." She looked toward the north. "But Hollow knows now. Knows we're not just running. knows someone's shooting back, and he knows it's accurate. Will he come himself? He will. Her jaw set hard. Because this isn't about cattle anymore. It's about pride. About proving no woman, no widow can defy Edric Hollow and live. Thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm building. Aerys looked up at the darkening sky. Good, she said. Rain will cover our tracks, make it harder for them to follow. Aerys, I said carefully, those shots you just made, from horseback, at that distance, that's not something normal people can do. She looked at me, something fierce and free in her eyes that I'd never seen before. I'm not normal people, Ridge. I never was. I just pretended for 12 years. She smiled. Time to stop pretending. Then she wheeled Ashfall around and rode north back toward her hidden herd. And I sat there on my horse watching her disappear into the gathering storm, finally understanding what Bram must have seen when he met her. Not a woman who needed taming, not a wild thing that needed civilizing, but a force of nature that had agreed temporarily to hold still. And now unleashed, there was no stopping her. That night, word reached us through a rider from town. Edric Hollow himself was coming, not sending men, coming personally, with 20 riders, the full force of his operation. He's making it final, Anil said when we heard. This is his declaration. Beat us here, make an example, and every small rancher in the territory folds. How long do we have? I asked the messenger. They ride at dawn. You'll see them by noon tomorrow. I looked north toward where Aerys had hidden her cattle, toward where she was even now probably planning 3 moves ahead. Ride to Mrs. Veil, I told the messenger. Tell her Hollow's coming with everything he's got. What should I tell her you're going to do? I checked my rifle, made sure every round was loaded. Tell her, I said, that we're going to do exactly what she'd do. Stand our ground, protect what's ours, and remind Edric Hollow that some things are worth fighting for. The messenger rode off, and I looked at the men around me. Good men. Scared, yes, but not running. Tomorrow, I said, we find out if justice means anything in this territory, if a woman with a rifle and a righteous cause can stand against money and power and corruption. You think she can do it? Ven asked. I thought about Aerys, about Steady-Eye Sarah, about 12 years of hiding followed by this sudden, brilliant resurrection. I think, I said, that Edric Hollow just made the worst mistake of his life. What's that? He's hunting a woman who never misses. Thunder rolled overhead. The storm was coming, and with it the reckoning. The storm hit just before dawn. Not the gentle rain we'd hoped for. A full Wyoming fury wind that bent the grass, flat rain that fell sideways, thunder that shook the ground. The kind of storm that makes you think the world might be ending. Perfect weather for a war. I found Aerys at first light. She'd brought her group down from the North Canyon, combined the herds. All 170 head together now. No more hiding. No more splitting forces. What changed? I asked, shouting over the wind. The plan. She was checking Ashfall's cinches, her hair plastered to her face by rain. Hollow's bringing everything he's got, so we do the same. One herd, one stand, one chance. Where? She pointed east. Through the rain I could barely make out a narrow gap between 2 ridges. Carter's Crossing. The old ford where the river ran fast and mean. We push them through there, she said. Get them across before Hollow arrives. Once we're on the far side, we're 6 miles from Cheyenne. Federal jurisdiction. Hollow can't touch us. Can we make it? If we move now, if we're lucky. She swung onto Ashfall. And if I can buy us enough time. How? She pulled out her Winchester, the special one with the scope I'd only glimpsed before. By reminding Edric Hollow that some people are more dangerous than he ever imagined. We moved the herd through the storm. Gravehorn led steady as a ship in rough water. The other cattle followed, trusting his calm. Ish and Ral worked the flanks. Anil and his boys rode drag, pushing stragglers. I rode beside Aerys at the front. You should have stayed back, she said. Tried that once. Didn't work out well. I kept my eyes on the trail ahead. Not making that mistake again. She glanced at me. Something softened in her face. Bram would have liked you being here, she said quietly. He always said you were the best man he knew. He was wrong about that. No. She shook her head. He just knew something you're still learning. That being a good man isn't about never making mistakes. It's about how you act after you make them. Before I could respond, Ven came galloping up from the rear. Riders, he shouted, coming fast from the west. 20, maybe more. Aerys's jaw tightened. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. She looked ahead. Carter's Crossing was still 2 miles away. The herd was moving as fast as we dared push them, but it wasn't enough. We'd never make it before Hollow caught us. Ridge, Aerys said, voice calm as Sunday morning. Take the herd. Push them hard. Get them across that ford no matter what. And you, I'll slow Hollow down. Aerys, that's an order. She reined Ashfall to a stop. Get my cattle to safety. That's all that matters. She looked at me one more time. In her eyes I saw everything she wasn't saying, the gratitude, the trust, the knowledge that this might be goodbye. Then she wheeled Ashfall around and rode back toward the oncoming storm, toward 20 armed men, led by the man who'd murdered her husband. I'll tell you what bravery looks like. It looks like a widow on a black horse riding alone into impossible odds because she promised a dead man she wouldn't surrender his dream. That's what I saw when I turned back for one last glimpse before pushing the herd forward. Aerys had taken position on a small rise overlooking the trail. High ground, good sight lines, the kind of tactical advantage a military mind would choose. Through the rain I saw her dismount, saw her kneel beside a boulder, saw her settle the Winchester against her shoulder with the ease of long practice. Then I turned back to the herd and did what she'd ordered. I got her cattle to safety. Edric Hollow came like thunder. I heard the shots start as we pushed the herd toward the crossing, not the rapid crack of panicked firing. Slow, methodical, precise. One shot, then another, each one separated by heartbeats, each one finding its mark. Later, Anel's youngest boy, who'd been riding rear guard and saw it all, told me what happened. Hollow's riders came in a wide line thinking to surround and overwhelm. Professional approach, cavalry tactics. But the first rider went down when his rifle exploded in his hands, shot clean through the breech. The second lost his horse, not killed, just disabled, a leg shot that made the animal stumble and throw its rider. The third had his hat blown off his head, warning shot showing she could have taken him if she'd wanted. They scattered, the boy said, eyes wide with awe. 20 men with rifles, and they scattered like quail because one woman was shooting, and they couldn't even see where she was through the rain. Hollow himself had pulled up, the boy said, stopped his horse and stared at that ridge where Aerys knelt invisible in the storm. And then Hollow had done something that told me everything about the kind of man he was. He'd ordered his men to spread out and flank, not to retreat, not to reconsider, but to surround and kill. Because for Edric Hollow, losing wasn't an option, even if winning meant murdering a woman in cold blood. We got the herd across the ford, barely. The water was high from the storm running fast and mean. 3 cattle were swept away despite our best efforts, but the rest made it. 167 head of split pine beef reached the far bank in safety. I was organizing the men to push them further east when I heard it. A different kind of gunshot. Heavier, closer, coming from the ridge where I'd left Aerys. Ish, I shouted. Take the herd, push for Cheyenne. Ridge what? But I was already riding back across the ford, back through the storm, back toward the sound of guns, back toward Aerys. I found them in a natural bottleneck between 2 rock walls. Hollow had given up trying to surround her. Instead, he'd pushed forward with overwhelming force. 10 men on foot, rifles up, advancing on the position where Aerys had made her stand. She'd fallen back to the bottleneck. Smart tactics. They couldn't flank her, they couldn't use their numbers, had to come through single file. But she was pinned, trapped. I saw her crouched behind a fallen log Winchester at her shoulder. She'd fire drop back, Move position, fire again, keeping them at bay but running out of room, running out of time. I dismounted behind cover and started returning fire. Not accurate like Aerys, but enough to give her breathing space. She glanced back, saw me. Her eyes widened. "Ridge, I told you." "You told me to save the cattle," I shouted back. "They're saved. Now let me help." A bullet whined past my head. Too close. Then I saw him. Edric Hollow himself stepping out from behind cover. Tall, imposing, silver-streaked hair plastered by rain. He held a lever-action rifle like a man who knew how to use it. "Mrs. Veil," he called out, voice cultured, almost friendly. "This is foolishness. Your cattle are gone. You've lost, surrender now, and I'll let you walk away." Aerys stood, calm and straight in the pouring rain. "You murdered my husband," she called back. "I did what was necessary for progress. You're a coward who shoots men in the back." Hollow's face darkened. "I gave Bram every chance to be reasonable. He chose stubbornness, just like you're choosing it now." "No," Aerys's voice rang clear. "I'm choosing justice, and I'm choosing to finish what Bram started." She raised her Winchester, not aiming at Hollow, aiming past him. I realized what she was doing a heartbeat before she fired. The shot struck a rope, the rope that held a pile of precariously balanced boulders above the trail. The rocks came down like judgment. Hollow's men scattered, shouting, the bottleneck filled with dust and debris. In the chaos, Aerys was already moving, circling to better ground. But Hollow had moved too, faster than I'd expected. He came up behind her, rifle raised. I didn't think, just moved. Threw myself between them. The shot took me in the left shoulder, spun me around. I went down hard. Through the pain, I saw Aerys wheel around, saw her Winchester come up smooth and perfect, saw her put a bullet through Hollow's rifle stock, shattering the weapon and sending it flying from his hands. Then she was standing over me, Winchester aimed steady at Hollow's chest. "Don't move," she said. Not loud, not angry, just absolutely certain. Hollow stood there, disarmed, rain dripping from his expensive coat. His face was pale. "You can't win this," he said. "Even if you kill me, my men will—" "Your men will what?" Aerys stepped forward. "Look around Hollow. Look at what's left." I managed to turn my head. Through the rain and pain I saw them. Hollow's riders scattered and disorganized, several wounded, more missing their weapons, and standing on the ridge above, watching but not participating, was Corrick Dane. He caught my eye, nodded once, then deliberately turned his horse and rode away. East, not back toward Hollow's camp, away. "Your best tracker just left you," Aerys said. "Your men are beaten. Your ambush failed. And in about 5 minutes, Federal Marshal Wright and his deputies are going to come over that ridge because I sent word to him 3 days ago about exactly where you'd be." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Aerys smiled, cold and sharp. "You want to bet your life on that?" As if summoned, we heard it. Hoofbeats, coming from the east. A dozen riders crested the ridge, led by a man with a silver marshal's star. Hollow's face went white. "Edric Hollow," the marshal called out. "You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, land fraud, and about 15 other charges. Drop any weapons and get on your knees." Hollow looked at Aerys, then at the marshal, then at his scattered, defeated men. His shoulders sagged. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes," Aerys replied. "It is." They took Hollow away in irons. His men, too, those who hadn't run. Marshal Wright personally supervised making sure everything was documented. Federal case, no chance of local corruption interfering. A doctor tended my shoulder. "Clean through," he said. "Painful but not serious. I'd heal." Aerys sat beside me while he worked, saying nothing. Just there. When it was done, when the marshal had ridden off with his prisoners, she finally spoke. "You took a bullet for me." Seemed like the thing to do. I tried to smile. Came out as more of a grimace. "You didn't have to." "Yeah, I did." I met her eyes. "Bram saved my life by going alone that day. Least I could do was return the favor to his wife." She was quiet for a long moment. "He'd be proud of you," she said finally. "And Ridge, you don't owe me anything. You don't owe Bram anything. You were there when it mattered. That's all anyone can ask." Thunder rumbled softer now. The storm was passing. We reached Cheyenne 2 days later. The cattle sold for top dollar. Every head accounted for. Split Pine Ranch was secure for another year, maybe longer. Marshal Wright took Aerys's evidence, Bram's journal, the bullet, ammunition records, witness statements. "This is solid," he said. "Hollow will hang, or spend the rest of his life in prison." "I don't care which," Aerys replied, "as long as justice is done." The trial came 2 months later. I was there for all of it. Watched Hollow try to bluster and deny, watched the evidence pile up, watched the jury deliberate for less than an hour. Guilty, on all counts. And on the third day of testimony, Corrick Dane walked into that courtroom and took the stand. He testified about Hollow's operations, about the ambushes he'd helped plan, about conversations he'd overheard regarding Bram's death. When it was done, when Hollow was sentenced to life in federal prison, Corrick found Aerys outside the courthouse. I watched from a distance as they talked. Couldn't hear the words, but I saw them shake hands, saw Corrick tip his hat and walk away, saw Aerys watch him go with something like sadness in her eyes. Later I asked her what he'd said, that he was sorry, that he was going to Montana to start over, that he hoped someday to be the man I thought he could be. "What did you say?" "That it's never too late to choose better, that the skills I taught him could still do good if he chose to use them that way." She paused. "And that I forgave him." "Did you mean it?" "I did." She looked at me. "Hate is exhausting, Ridge. I'm tired of carrying it. Better to let it go and move forward." Aerys ran Split Pine for another 20 years. She remarried eventually. Good man named Thomas Chen, a surveyor from California. He loved all of her, the rancher and the sharpshooter both. Never asked her to be less than she was. They were happy. She trained young women in shooting. Said self-defense was a right, not a privilege. Some of those girls went on to become lawmen, ranch owners, even a federal marshal. She testified at 3 more trials against corrupt cattle barons. Her evidence helped clean up the territory, and she never fired a shot in anger again. Didn't need to. She passed 6 months ago, peacefully, in her sleep. Thomas was with her. The funeral drew people from across 3 states, ranchers, lawmen, former show performers, women she'd trained, lives she'd touched. They buried her next to Bram like she'd asked, 2 headstones under the Wyoming sky, and she left me something in her will. I'm holding it now as I tell you this story. Her Winchester, the special one, with an inscription carved into the stock for Ridge, who learned that protecting someone sometimes means standing beside them, not in front of them. Thank you for being there when it mattered. A V. But that's not all she left. There was a letter, too, written in her final weeks. The journalist sitting across from me doesn't know about it yet. I open it now, read it one more time, even though I've memorized every word. Dear Ridge, by the time you read this, I'll be with Bram again. I hope wherever we are, there's good land and clear water and peace. I want you to know something I never said out loud. That day you didn't ride with Bram. It wasn't your fault. He chose to go alone because he was protecting you. I found entries in his journal I never showed you. He knew Hollow's men were watching, knew they might make their move. If you'd been there, you'd both be dead. Bram saved your life by going alone. He wanted you to survive, to help me after. And you did exactly that. So please, Ridge, let go of the guilt. Honor Bram's memory by living fully, by remembering that he loved you like a brother, that he trusted you above all others. And tell my story true when people ask, not the legend, the truth. That I was a woman who loved 2 men in different ways, who gave up fame for meaning, who learned that hiding who you are doesn't make you better, it just makes you less. Who found out that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the cost is high. Thank you for standing with me. Thank you for taking that bullet. Thank you for being exactly who Bram always said you were, the best man he knew. With love and gratitude, Aerys. I fold the letter carefully, put it back in my pocket. Look at the journalist who's been listening to this whole story. That's what happened, I say. That's the truth about Steady-Eye Sarah and the widow who brought down Edric Hollow. And the lesson, the journalist asks, what did she teach you? I think about that for a long moment. Look west toward the mountains where Split Pine still runs under new ownership, where Bram and Aerys rest side by side. She taught me that strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and choosing courage anyway. That burying who you are doesn't make you better, it just makes you incomplete. And that sometimes the quietest people are the ones who change everything. I stand picking up the Winchester. She taught me that legends are shortcuts. The truth takes longer, but it's worth telling. The journalist closes his notebook. Thank you for telling it. Thank you for listening. He leaves. I stay on the porch watching the sun set over Wyoming. 25 years since that cattle drive. 25 years since I watched Aerys Veil become Steady-Eye Sarah one more time, and I'm still learning from her. Still understanding that the woman who never missed, she never missed what mattered most. The truth. Justice. The people worth fighting for. That's the truest shot of all. The wind picks up carrying the scent of rain. Somewhere out there on land, she helped keep free cattle graze peacefully. Families work ranches without fear. Young women practice shooting, learning they're stronger than anyone told them. That's Aerys's legacy. Not the legend of Steady-Eye Sarah, but the truth of a woman who refused to be less than she was, who fought when fighting was needed, who protected what she loved with skill and courage and an unwavering hand. I set the Winchester carefully against the porch rail, walk inside as twilight settles over the frontier, and I sleep well, for the first time in 25 years without the weight of guilt. Because Aerys was right about one thing. Bram saved me that day in the snow, and I honored that gift by standing beside his wife when she needed me most. That's all any of us can do. Stand beside the people worth standing for, and never miss when it matters. The end.